What's up, Dallas family? I'm Reagan.
And I'm DJ.
We're going to be your host this morning. Welcome.
If you're watching online with us, we're so happy that you're here. You guys are such an important part of our community here at Dulles and our church family, and we're just so glad that you've joined us this morning.
And if you're joining us in person, welcome to Lightridge. We have two super exciting things that we want to tell you about this morning. Number one is I am hosting a new girls group with my mom and sister. This is going to start on August 9th at 7 p.m. at our house. This is for all ages, college age and older. It's just a place to be and hang out and meet new girls and connect. So RSVP on the app and bring your friends.
Students, on August 22nd at 5 p.m., we're going to be hosting a private laser tag event for you guys. It's going to be awesome. There's going to be food. You can bring your parents, bring your families. While you guys are playing laser tag, your parents will have some time to connect with the other parents of students. It's going to be an awesome time. You can RSVP on the app. August 22nd, 5 p.m. You guys don't want to miss this.
We are so glad that you've joined us this morning.
We love you guys. Have a great Sunday.
Hey, Dulles family. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday. And to those watching online, I want to just say, if you're in the Dulles area, we can't wait to see you. We can't wait to see you at Lightridge High School. And if you are watching online, just chat with us. You don't have to say a lot, but it's so encouraging to someone else who's watching at home alone to know that they're not alone. So it really goes a long way when you tell us where you're watching from or that you're just online with us. We hear it constantly from others who watch online that it's super encouraging to know they're not just watching something in a vacuum, they're actually experiencing something together with you, with others. So welcome to everybody. 2 weeks ago, we started the series we're calling Valuable. We're alternating the series this summer with Andy Stanley's series, Full Faith. And I'm going to just dive right into a passion of mine. If you've known me very long, you know that this core value runs through my veins. And it's true of our directional team and our team leaders here at Dulles. And so again, a core value, doesn't describe a goal or something you'd like to become someday. A core value, a central high value in your team or your organization or even your family describes who you are and specifically how you behave. So we're talking by way of invitation in this series for you to dive in with us to the heart of Jesus in developing these values in your life. You don't have to master them. You don't have to be necessarily an expert or good at any one of them right now. We're just inviting you to be part of the reflection of Jesus' heart to this world that we live in by owning these values or saying, yes, this is something I really want to grow in. So by way of invitation, we're inviting you to behave like us. And again, none of us, not me, not our directional leaders, none of us have perfected. We certainly would never claim such a thing to perfect these values. But we are really committed to growing more and more in these values because we believe they emulate the heart of Jesus to people who are desperate for truth and desperate for the reality of God. So you're invited to dive into this with us. So before I tell you what this second core value is, I want to just tell you my view of what the church is supposed to be. Jesus designed the church. He created the church to be the most compelling, safest, most welcoming place, most compelling force on planet Earth because the church is the collection of you and me and people just like us who share the same story, our common unity, our community, our communion. Our common unity is our story of people who were lonely, people who had been selfish, people who carried regrets, maybe some failures, who'd been changed by the power and heart of Jesus. So much so that we are secure. We're not perfect. We still have our struggles. We still have our moments, of course, but we have become secure and we're becoming more and more secure. We have this growing security that God, who designed us, the God of beauty who made each of us, loves us forever. We share that in common. People who are broken and people who are selfish and people who carry regrets and maybe some guilt. We are being changed from the inside out by a God who loves us no matter what. And so when we share that story, when we express that story, when we sing that story, when we serve together because we've been served by a God when we didn't deserve it, it makes a compelling case to onlookers that something's happened to a group of people that is inexplicable, that technology can't do, that universities can't do. There's no force on earth that can change the human heart. We fight today. We fight with this belief that whoever's in the White House or whoever's in control on Capitol Hill somehow sets the true course for our future and has the most power. And it's kind of ridiculous that we argue these kinds of things, and we've believed as a society this argument when what we believe here at Dulles is that Jesus actually has the power to change the human heart. I don't believe a president, left or right, or whoever's in control in Congress, I don't believe any of that has the ability to change the human heart. We collectively, we who we call the church, share the story. We share the common unity that Jesus has actually changed us. He's changing us from the inside out. That is what the world is desperate for. That's what the world is really craving. So Jesus created the church to be this expression of life change and heart change. People who are depressed and anxious actually have real, actual anticipation in their lives. People who thought chasing money or chasing other people was really the point of life and found themselves depressed or empty, have realized that God actually designed each of us for a unique purpose, and we're walking in that. Okay, so that's the purpose of the church. That was the design, the original design of the church. But here's the problem. Throughout church history, the church has emulated a lot of what Old Testament Israel has done, and the church has become very inside focused. When the church becomes inside focused, when the church becomes exclusionary and believes that the most important people are already in the room, they already believe what we believe, they think what we think, they even worship the way we worship, the church steps into this space of self-righteousness. And the moment that happens, the church no longer looks like Jesus. And we've lost our influence. The global church around the world for hundreds of years has been losing its influence, losing its compelling, beautiful nature that the world is desperate for, because we have made the church for insiders. And it's very inside focused. And it's one of the great tragedies in human history, because it's the antithesis of what Jesus was about. It's the antithesis, it's the opposite of who Jesus was and what he created the church to be. So this second core value follows closely core value number 1, which was humility. 2 weeks ago, we talked about humility. And when we talk out humility, we say that humility leads to healthy. And if you missed 2 weeks ago, you can easily find that on our YouTube channel or on our website. But humility is a must for us to live out and breathe in and breathe out core value number 2 here at Dulles. Because core value number 2 is outsiders, a love for outsiders. We believe that the church isn't designed to think about outsiders occasionally. And when I say outsiders, I'm talking about those outside of our faith or outside the walls of the church, those who maybe are cynical about God or skeptical. The church for hundreds of years, and I grew up in the church, and I really saw this and felt this, the church tends to, and I'm generalizing the church, the global or the Western church tends to look at outsiders as rebellious or anti what we're about or wrong. And it's such an insider, selfish, almost spiritually narcissistic view, counter to what Jesus designed his church to be. So we believe the church was never intended to just think about outsiders once in a while, or to tolerate outsiders, or to even just be tolerant. we believe the church loving outsiders is the point. And it began with Jesus. Jesus loved outsiders. His disciples were so outside. They were so absolutely different from what the religious leaders thought the Messiah's leaders would look like. Peter was a mess, starting arguments and fights and cutting off somebody's ear out of anger. And James and John were competitive. They were competing. They wanted to be the best. They wanted Jesus to favor them more than others. I mean, Jesus called a motley crew of disciples to follow him, who he would train and reshape and change the hearts of, so much so that they would selflessly live out the heart of Jesus to this world. Jesus came for outsiders. There were no insiders. And this is one of the hardest things that people who've been in church for a long time wrestle with. In fact, the longer you've been in church, the harder you're going to struggle with this. I've just learned that from so many coffees and lunches with people. The longer you've been in church, chances are the more likely you are to believe that insiders kind of have our act more together. Insiders are the ones that are closer to God's heart, and outsiders have issues. They're probably different politically, and they are anti-God, and they're rebellious to what we believe. And I'm just telling you, it is the opposite of the heart of Jesus. Jesus came for outsiders. Loving outsiders is the point. It's the point of the church. Okay, so I want to just tell you the story. Luke 14 and Luke 15 is a collection of stories, actually. It's not just one story. It's really several stories designed together to tell us the heart of the Father God and why he sent Jesus. And it was all about outsiders. So I'm going to begin in Luke 14:1. We're not going to take the time to read all of this. These are two lengthy chapters. I'm asking you right now to read Luke 14 and 15 more than once this week and allow the beauty and the challenge of these chapters to get into your soul. Okay, so Luke 14:1. One Sabbath day, which we consider in our culture, Sabbath is usually Sunday. In Jesus' day on the calendar, it would have been our Saturday. This was the day of worship. It was very important to the Jewish people, and the Jewish leaders believed you don't do anything that remotely looks like work on the Sabbath day, because that's breaking one of the Old Testament laws. Okay, that's important to understand the story. One Sabbath day, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, the Pharisees were the arrogant, self-righteous religious leaders from the Old Testament Israel. When Jesus went to eat at one of the prominent Pharisees' homes, he was being carefully watched by all the Pharisees. They were constantly trying to discredit him as being a messenger of God, or certainly being the Messiah. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. This was later interpreted as the condition called dropsy. It was a skin condition where the skin would swell. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, these are essentially the pastors of the Jewish culture in Jesus' day. He's asking the Pharisees, is it lawful in terms of the Old Testament law, the way you think God favors people and obeying God, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day or not? They remained silent because Jesus kept outwitting them in all of their debates and all of their dialogue. So taking hold of the man that was sick, Jesus healed him and sent him on his way. Then Jesus turns to these religious leaders and experts. If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull the child out, or even pull your ox out? Of course you would. Of course, this is a rhetorical question. It's an emergency. You're letting the Old Testament law to rest and worship one day a week. You're letting it become this legalistic, suffocating idea. Of course you would rescue somebody in trouble on the Sabbath day. They had nothing to say. So when Jesus noticed here at this Pharisee's house how the guests, all the other Pharisees, picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor. Do not sit in the most prominent seat at the reception table, for a person more distinguished than you or closer to the family may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will have to come to you and say, and Jesus is saying this would be embarrassing. This is humiliating. You've taken this high seat of honor at the table. The host has to come and say to you, can you please give this person your seat? Then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place. See, this is something the Pharisees have no concept of. And this gets to the heart of value number 1 that we talked about last week, humility. Then humiliated, you will have to take the place. See, we'd rather choose humility than to be humiliated. When you are invited, take the lowest place. Choose humility. Don't be humbled by the host or master of the feast. Choose humility. Take the lower place so that when your host comes, he'll say to you, friend, move up to a better seat. Move up to a better place. Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Okay, a fierce debate breaks out between the Pharisees and Jesus. One of the Pharisees takes issue and says, well, wait a minute. We, the closest people to God, we the Pharisees, we already know we're going to eat at God's great feast in eternity someday. So let's talk about those who maybe won't make it to that feast, or they could if they do the right things, because we're already doing the right things. We're following all the Old Testament laws. And Jesus essentially says back to them, he begins the path toward the cross and his crucifixion when he upsets the Pharisees so much here, where he tells them, you actually aren't going to be at the feast. That's the irony here. Experts of the religious law and those who are pious and hold yourselves up above everybody else, you're not actually going to be at my feast. And so this ugly scene unfolds where the Pharisees are like, he's blaspheming God, and Jesus is telling them, you don't know the heart of God because I came for outsiders. So the point that Jesus was making is that in his kingdom, in his space, to his people, the guest of honor was the unclean man. See, in Jewish custom, in the Jewish custom of Jesus' day, the man with dropsy, with the swollen skin condition, was deemed spiritually unclean. There was something about his life that made him unworthy to God. There was some kind of condition that made him unclean. And so no one like that should be at such a special place like the Pharisees gathering for dinner. And Jesus is making the point that to him and to the people that truly follow Jesus, this man who was sick on the Sabbath day, who needed rescuing and needed help and healing and hope, he is the guest of honor. And so Jesus is trying to tell the Pharisees in the parable, listen, when you come to my feast, when you come to the most important feast, where God the Father invites you to his table, to friendship, to gather as part of his family, humble yourselves, have humble hearts, take a lower seat, and allow the true guests of honor who are struggling, who are lonely, who are deemed unclean by society, allow them the better seat. Because in my kingdom, the one who's hurting the most is the one that we make the best seat for. And we ensure that there's a place at the table for. This ugly argument breaks out, and the Pharisees are calling blasphemy, and they begin plotting Jesus' death. So Jesus just doubles down and tells another parable, and he describes the feast of the Father and who he's inviting to the table. And it's everyone who's lonely or forgotten or who carries regrets, or people who have made awful mistakes. They are receiving special invitations to this great feast, this banquet with wine and food that never runs out, while the religious leaders are the ones who actually, the insiders who have the inside focus, that the feast is really just for them, they're the ones who actually are declining the invitation. And Jesus says, some of you will say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't come because I've been invited to a wedding. Or I'm sorry, my ox is in a ditch and I need to go get my ox out. Or I've bought some new farm animals. I need to go inspect them. There's going to be all kinds of excuses why you don't actually lean into and make space for and make your priority the feast that God has prepared for the hurting. And so all of this is to say that Jesus is describing to the Pharisees, you don't think you hurt. You don't think you were an outsider. You don't think that you are someone who's broken or has been marred by selfishness. And because you don't see your own brokenness, there's no place for you here at this table, because people who've been broken and people who've carried shame or guilt or regret, people who've been lonely, people who've been depressed, and who have reached out to God or said yes to the invitation to God's table, they're the ones who want to, in turn, offer a seat to others at this great feast we've been invited to. And so that's where this story ends in Luke 14, and it's why it's my favorite chapter in all of Scripture, because Jesus shows that the invitation goes to all the hurting and wounded and those who even are religiously skeptical. They're invited to the feast. They're invited to relationship with God. They're invited to this great party. A lot of us have this picture of heaven, of clouds and floating angels. And, you need to ask yourself, where do I get that imagery? It's from church tradition. It's from certain things that Scripture says that in often cases are metaphors. Jesus is giving us here the picture of eternity being a party, being a feast with endless food and drink. And the people who are invited to the party are the broken and hurting and those with shame or guilt. And when the inviter, who's going to the streets and the back alleys to invite anybody that he can invite to this feast, comes back and tells God the Father, everyone's coming, but there's still room. There's still room at the table. There's still empty seats. The Father sends him back out, who is Jesus. The inviter is Jesus, goes back out to more alleyways and back streets and finds more people to come to the table, because there's always room. There's always room for the hurting and the broken and the skeptical and the searching. While the Pharisees refused to make room for the unclean. And so Jesus in Luke 14 turns the tables on everything, on the Jewish worldview of who's right and who's going to heaven. And Jesus says, I came for the outsider. And if you think you're an insider and that my feast is only for insiders, you're actually the ones that won't be included in my feast. And it's ultimately what got Jesus crucified by the religious leaders. All right, so I want to go to first three verses of chapter 15, because going right into the next chapter, this is what we're told. Now the tax collectors, who were notorious, they were famous for cheating people and overtaxing, and they were Jewish people who were really seen as traitors. When the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, many of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, teachers of the Old Testament, were muttering to themselves, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So then Jesus turns to these religious leaders again, and he tells three parables. The parable of the lost coin, the parable of the lost sheep, and the parable of the lost son, the prodigal son. And they're beautiful stories of God's heart coming for those who need rescue, those who are broken, those who are lost. While the Pharisees are criticizing Jesus for spending all of his time with broken people, with unclean people, with people who are notorious. We're told in one case they're notorious sinners. Jesus is hanging out with them because Jesus came for outsiders. And as long as the church believes that it's those of us who gather on Sunday mornings together that are the important people, we're the ones who are important in God's eyes, and we're the ones who get it. And those who are outside, they don't get it, and they're just rebelling against God. The church is going to continue to lose more and more of its influence. Self-righteousness and being exclusionary as a church is so counter to what Jesus is about. The church loses its compelling nature. It loses its power. It loses the centrality of Jesus' love, which is what draws a hurting world. So for the rest of our time here, I just want to read to you some notes in our directional leader notes about this core value of loving outsiders, and that loving outsiders is the point. Okay, so again, just from our notes, Jesus came to relate to outsiders. It's why he came. He didn't come for the insiders and then for a couple hours on Saturday he'd think about the outsiders, or he would maybe feed with compassion once a month people who are hungry or struggling in some way. Jesus came to relate to outsiders. He included outsiders as part of his family. Jesus came to invite outsiders to a feast and to sit at his table. And Jesus came to include outsiders in his movement of renewal. The future voices, listen to this. Think about the future of our church and the future of this compelling, beautiful church that the church is supposed to be, that many of us have never really seen or experienced in a large way in our lifetime. The future voices and leaders of the church are currently outsiders. The future leaders of the church and voices and people who are going to tell these amazing stories of God's love and what God has done to give hope, they're not even in the church yet, because they're waiting for you and me to show the love of Jesus and to make the church a place for outsiders. The world will know God's plan by our love. Now, Jesus tells us this in John 13 when he washed the disciples' feet and he instituted communion. The whole scene of the Last Supper was in John 13. Jesus says at the end of that whole story at the Last Supper that the world will know that you are my disciples when you love one another, when you serve one another, when you selflessly love one another. The world will know you're my disciples. Then in chapter 17, Jesus is praying his final prayer before being arrested. And in this prayer, he's praying for you and me. He's praying for those, the collection of the church, the collective story of heart change and life change, who are you and me. He's praying for us. And he says to the Father, may the world know that you sent me when they see the people of the church expressing their love. Well, what the church has taken from John 13 and 17 is that our real mission in this life is to love insiders, to love one another. And Jesus says, yes, love one another. Be selfless with one another. But we think the point is one another. The point is the world will know. Jesus says at the Last Supper in John 13, and he says in the Garden of Gethsemane just before his arrest in John 17, in both cases he says, if my people love one another and become people who express selfless love outward, the world will know. The onlooking world will see the evidence they need to see. And political power and political debate and who's won the White House, those things will pale in comparison when onlookers and outsiders and hurting people see our love, the love of Jesus that's changed us. So this is a reminder for some of you. For others of you, maybe this is the first time you've really heard this. I have a lot of issues with the church, the Western church today. I believe the Western church for hundreds of years has been evolving to be insulary, very siloed, very inside postured, with our backs to the outside walls and looking in. What can the church do for me? And just preferring and debating about the songs that we like and the messages that Brad gives and how encouraged I feel, and is Brad feeding me enough? And I don't really hear that actually at Dulles a whole lot, but this is the voice of thousands and thousands and millions of churchgoers in the Western world and in our country. And the more that the Christian population looks inward and cares about what they need and what they want and what they want the church to be doing, the less and less and less influence the church has in this broken world. I want to be part of the beautiful. I want to be part of a church that's compelling. I want to be part of a church who will get up out of my seat, where I believe that God wants to serve me and teach me and feed me in this church. I want to give up that seat and make room for someone else. And that doesn't push me out of the way. That doesn't mean I'm going to miss out on the great feast. It makes me more of an insider, actually, because I'm now standing with a towel over my arm, tableside at the great feast that God has invited the world to, and I get to be a servant at that table. And that's our invitation to you. Our invitation here at Dulles is not for you to just listen in. If you're just listening in and you're checking us out, we love it. We love it. Just keep joining us. You're trying to figure out what we believe. I hope we're helping you, and I hope I'm helping you kind of connect the dots to what we believe about Jesus. If you've been here online or in person for several months or 6 months, and this has become kind of your spiritual family, I'm just telling you, you're going to spiritually die if all you do is sit and listen. If all you do is sit and listen and you consume and you see the church as a place to feed you, you're going to just become a spiritual glutton. What God's calling you and me to is to be people who will stand up and give up our seat and be actively a part of making room for others in the church. That might mean just warmly, not weirdly, warmly welcoming somebody who's sitting alone at church, or being somebody who's just kind of on the lookout in the lobby for somebody who's coming in and maybe they're trying to find their way. And it means looking for opportunities to invite. Invest in people at work and in your neighborhood and in this world. Invest genuinely in them with care about their lives and who they are. And then when there's a good opportunity, invite them to come. Sit and listen about this Jesus with you. That's what it looks like to give up your seat and to become an active part of making room for others at the table of God's great feast. It's what we're all about here at Dulles. We are all about outsiders. I've been accused over the years for only caring about outsiders, and I don't care about insiders, and I'm not feeding people inside the church enough. Listen, I'm just going to say what John Ortberg, a pastor in California, said a long, long time ago. He said, people who've attended church for more than a year already have heard and heard again 90% of what they ever need to grow and to read and learn the story of Jesus and to take steps of faith. The biggest step of faith and growth you will ever take in your spiritual life and in experiencing God for yourself is in beginning to think about outsiders, making room for them, helping them understand, sitting and listening to their stories, helping them wrestle with complex issues about God and why there's suffering in this world, being willing to invest in somebody who's struggling with faith is going to help you grow faster than ever in your relationship with God. I love you, Dulles. I'm going to pray with you here, and I'm just putting it in front of you. I want you to be part of this with us. I want you to be part of building a contagious, infectious, compelling church where the power of heart change, which is Jesus' power, is offered and extended to others. God, I pray that we would say yes to this amazing challenge. I pray that we would do something this week. Each one of us would do something different to get us out of our comfortable seats. Maybe it's walking across the street to a neighbor. Maybe it's standing out in the lobby at Light Ridge High School to just look for somebody who comes in alone. God, I pray that you would whisper into our soul to get us out of our comfort and into this space that you've called us to, where we are about outsiders. We are about extending your love to outsiders the way you extended your love to me and each of us when we were outsiders. Amen. I love being church with you. I love doing church with you, but I love being God's church with you and being this kind of church. So let's just chase this amazing God together. I'll see you online this week.